Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1009A, and today's date is June 28th, 2016, and the title of the episode is Brexit Do-Over Petition is Fake. Now central bankers move to protests. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded an interview with Andy Hoffman. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. You can go right over there and view the video, or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to the right-hand side, you'll see the video there, or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing. Scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, and you'll see the video there, and you can play it right on the site. Now, today was a very interesting day. All of a sudden, the market was pushed up out of nowhere. I guess all of this is over and done with. Absolutely not. This is high-frequency traders, plunge protection team, the U.S. trying to make everything look like everything is fine. Remember, what happened in the U.K. was not something they expected. They didn't expect the people to say, let's leave. This wasn't part of their plan. Their plan was to remain, to bring down the economy when they were ready. Now that they want to leave, this is like something out of left field. And we're starting to see that the central bankers are getting very nervous. They're pushing very hard to get everything completed. Let's just get this over with. Because remember, the economy is going to be brought down by them. They know exactly when they're going to bring it down. They know who they're going to blame. We know they're going to try to bring us to war. And something like this does not fit into their playbook. And we can see right now they're trying to make it look like that everything is fine, that the economy is still doing well. This is nothing to be worried about, but this is something very big to be worried about. Because this just adds to the problems of what's going on right now. And we know the economy has been failing all along. We've been looking at many different economic indicators, and we've been tracking layoffs. I mean, there's layoffs after layoffs. I mean, look at Dow Chemical. They're laying off 2,500 people. I know they're merging with Corning, and they're letting people go, but still these people will not have jobs. Just like the rest of the people will not have jobs. This is 4% of their workforce. And we're getting word there's more layoffs coming. Now, we've been talking about real estate quite a bit, and we've been talking about housing prices coming down. The bubble is popping. And we know the central bankers, they set up a certain number of cities. They blew the bubbles up in those cities, and the rest of the outlying areas, they're seeing not what these cities are seeing. They're seeing the opposite. Well, it's starting to spread now. Case-Shiller, and we know they have their 20-city index. Now, it rose by 0.45% month on month. Now, they thought it was going to rise 0.85%. Now, people say, well, it did rise a little bit, but this shows us it's starting to slow down. And out in San Francisco, which we've reported on before, we talked about how prices are starting to come down. And now we're starting to see a picture of what's really happening. In San Francisco right now, year on year, housing prices have fallen by 18%. I mean, do you hear the sound of air flowing out of the bubble right now? Because this is exactly what's happening. And when we look at the situation, we see that New York, San Francisco, and many different areas are all starting to feel the same thing. Because what's happening right now is that the economic decline is starting to spread, just like we thought it was going to do. Now, of course, everyone's looking like, well, in my city, it seems like everything is fine. But I did a little poking around today to see how the East was doing, how the Southwest was doing. And you know what I see? It's very easy to do. Just go onto Zillow. Take a look at your neighborhood. Look at the people that are selling. And what you're going to find out is that a lot of the people, almost the majority of the people, they've been lowering their price. You can see how long their house has been on the market. Now, I've been looking all around, and I'm seeing this spread further and further to different areas. And this is what happened prior to 2008. And we're seeing it happen right now. Now, the Richmond Fed, well, it has collapsed to -7. This is the lowest since January of 2013. New order, that volume has completely crashed. And we're seeing that future expectations of hiring and work week is plunging right now. So when we look at all these economic indicators, what are we seeing? We are seeing they're going from bad to worse. And it's not going to improve. It's impossible. And we see that this is impossible. Yes, do we see little bounce ups? But when we step back and we look at the trend, it is a downward trend. Now, of course, the BEA, they came out with their first quarter GDP. They manipulated it. They revised. And they went from 0.5 to 0.8 to 1, now to 1.1. Look, we recovered. We hit 1.1% in GDP. Well, that's absolutely awful. For a recovery with employment at 4.7%, people should be spending like crazy, which is 70% of the GDP. We should see GDP skyrocketing, but we don't. Why is that? Well, when we look at the numbers and we look at unemployment, these are all fake. People are not out there working. This is why they're not spending. This is why factories aren't producing. It's very simple. It's common sense. But when we look at GDP, what brought GDP up? This is the big question. How are they continually getting a positive GDP number? We know they manipulate. That's a fact. But when we look at this, we see Obamacare. Obamacare accounted for 58% of U.S. growth. Is this really growth? People spending money on health care? No, this is not growth. If you strip this out, GDP is negative. We are in disaster mode right now. Now, when we look at the numbers, GDP grew by $44 billion, or 1.1% annualized. And when we look at this, $26 billion of it was from healthcare. So this shows us that the economy is not really growing. This economy is doomed. And it's getting harder and harder to manipulate these numbers, because when you look through them and you look through all the propaganda from the government and the corporate media, and you look through all that stuff and you see the root of the problem and you see what's really going on, you see that there's no way that this economy can survive. Actually, CNN did a poll, and I'm sure that they're shocked at the results. So they asked people, which of the following comes closer to your opinion on the economic system in the U.S.? And people had the choice to select three different options. The economic system is rigged in favor of certain groups. The economy system is fair to all Americans. I just don't know. And 71% of the people said that the economy is completely rigged. It didn't matter if the person was white, black, Hispanic. Didn't matter if they were Republican, Democrat, or Independent. It didn't matter. They believed the economy is rigged. Now, this is very interesting, because if the people believe the economy is rigged, that means they believe the government must be lying to them. If the government is lying to them, what else are they lying about? Now, because of the Brexit, we know this is all being blamed on the people of the UK. They've caused this. This is their problem. And the corporate media is out there, and they're pushing the idea that the sterling is continually dropping. It's an historic collapse. We've never seen anything like this in our lifetime. Well, that isn't really true. Now, although it is the biggest drop since the collapse of the Bretton Woods system in the 70s, there have been 8 bigger daily down moves since 1862. The bigger moves were in September of 1949, negative 30%. We see September 1931, negative 23%. September 1869, negative 18%. November 1967, negative 13%. March 1863, negative 10%. So we can see there are many different instances where the sterling has dropped, and dropped much further than it has during this Brexit. But of course, the corporate media, the governments, the central banks, they really want to play this up. And we see right now, as the UK leaves the EU, which they haven't really done yet, this was a referendum, the Parliament hasn't voted yet, we see the currency is declining. Actually, this is going to improve trade for the country. And this is what the central bankers are really worried about. That you're going to see a country do much, much better when they're not part of the EU central banking system. This is what they're really worried about. So during this time, we see Moody's, S&P, and now Fitch. They have downgraded the Bank of England's rating from AA plus to AA, just to get onto the bandwagon here. And we know the central bankers, they're doing whatever they possibly can to reverse this entire decision. Now, first they came up with this do-over petition where they're saying there's 3.5 million signatories and we can have a do-over. And of course, the corporate media was out there saying, yes, look at this. This is unbelievable. All of a sudden, the people are just rallying together to stay with the EU. Well, it turns out this is completely fabricated. And when we look at this, we see that a hacker that goes by 4chan and someone who's pretending to be anonymous wrote a script and basically had these signatures inputted into the site. So they tracked the IP addresses, and they were coming from all over the place. Vietnam, Ghana, Uganda, Turkey, Vatican City. Actually, in the Vatican City, the population is 800, and they got 30,000 signatures from there. North Korea. So what we're seeing right now is they were bouncing this off of all different servers, having it go to the UK website, and try to make it look like, look, all these people are rallying together. Well, it didn't work. It turns out it is completely fake, phony, and false. And right now, they have to move on to something else. So what are they moving on to? Well, now they're talking about protests, anti-Brexit protests. And we know the central bankers and the governments that are intertwined with the central bankers, they love getting people together and having protests. And if a peaceful protest doesn't work, what do? Well, they ramp that up. We see people starting to get a little wild. There's riots, and we might see this. So this is something that we really need to look at. Now, the European Parliament, they're calling for an immediate trigger on the Brexit protocol. Now, of course, as we know, the Parliament of the UK, they need to go ahead and push Article 50, and they need to initiate it. But we can see the European Parliament, they want this done very, very quickly. They're saying, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Now, the question is why? Why are they pushing so hard to get this done? Well, we have to remember, this all came out of left field. They thought the UK was going to remain in the EU. They thought they had this. It was already fixed. It was already done. And this whole thing, they lost control of. Now they're worried. Because remember, they want to bring this economy down the way they want it to be brought down. They have their story. They know exactly what they're going to do step by step, who they're going to blame this on. And if the economy comes down now because of this, this is not going to end well for them. And we can see right now that David Cameron, he's resisting any pressure to begin the 2-year talks about initiating Article 50. He says, maybe I'll just leave it up to the next person that comes in and that will be down the line. Now, it seems like they're stalling right now. And the question is, why would they stall at this point? Are they creating some type of an event where they can say, look what just happened here. The UK can't leave. Sorry about that, people, but we're going to have to stay in the EU right now. And we know as we move further and further into this year, the collapse is coming. Things are getting worse. We know they have certain things planned. And this is something that we need to really watch. Because as this economy continually deteriorates, and I've said this many times, we all need to be prepared. And we can see from just going back a year how many things have happened already and how much closer we are to this collapse. But very interestingly, the U.S. government, there was a time they told every American to stockpile food, make sure you're prepared, make sure you're ready. And if you go back to the 50s and the 60s, the U.S. government actually encouraged people to create fallout shelters, to make sure they had water, to make sure they had food, to prepare for a nuclear war. Now, today, they're saying that those are the people that are crazy. There's no reason to prepare. Now, remember, back then, the U.S. government was telling you to do this. Today, they're not, which means something's going to happen, because we do the opposite of what the government tells us. If they're telling us everything's going to be okay, we know right now things are not going to be okay. If they tell us they're not forecasting any type of recession or crash, we know there's going to be one. So we can see right now that since the government is not really out there telling us to make sure that you have stockpiles of food and water, they do tell you, yeah, be prepared maybe for a month or a couple weeks, just in case there's a storm. But for an economic collapse, for a world war, they're not going in that direction. And this tells us that this is exactly where we're headed, and everyone does need to be prepared and ready, because this collapse is coming. It's building right now, and before you know it, it will be here. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.